I sometimes misremembered what day it was, even forgot Sunday once in a while, if I was busy with planting or harvest. But Maeve never let me forget Bookmobile Day. The fourth Tuesday of every month, she was always at my front door by 9 o'clock or thereabouts, rain or shine, with her little plastic bag of 2 or 3 books she had read. She always said, "Thank you so much," when I opened the door, because I was her ride. Her husband, Mike, had the truck out by 6 a.m., wasn't about to stay home late just so his wife could get her silly novels switched out. Me, though, I was old enough that I didn't start work near so early anymore. And anyway, I knew Maeve since she was a little girl, like enough to be in my own daughter. So it wasn't no trouble driving her down off the mountain to Ben's Cross, where the bookmobile stopped once a month. She'd learned a long time ago that I wasn't interested in what she'd read since last bookmobile day, especially with the kind of books she chose, but there was always stuff to talk about on the way anyways, about her kids, or her sister's kids, or the weather, or the crops. I always saw what she read anyway, though, because in my old pickup she'd take the books out of her plastic bag and look over their fronts and backs like she was taking a last look at one of her kids before he went off to the factory in town or something. Most of the books had people like I'd never seen in real life on the cover. Men with long hair and no shirt, and women with their bosoms pushed up to their chins. Half the time they were Scotsmen, the men, and all they were wearing was a kilt. Most of the people up here on the mountain are Scotch or Irish. In fact, most are Scotch and Irish after being in America this long and marrying each other. But I never seen a man like that in the flesh, all muscle and no fat. Most of us up here are carrying something up front over our belts, except some old really skinny folk like Cal Coogans. But he's an old farmer who smokes like he can't breathe except through his pipe. I seen him without his shirt once when I went by his place and it was laundry day. And he may be skinny, but he ain't got muscles like in the books, just bones under his skin and weird hairs on the outside. And the women on those books, they don't look decent to me. They're all slender like 14-year-olds, ain't yet had a baby or started putting on hips, but they're making eyes at those men like they're all grown up. We may be living out yonder up on the mountain, but we ain't like those hillbillies that marry their cousins at 12 years old. We're good Christian folk on the mountain, at least when we remember it's Sunday. But I ain't never said anything to Maeve because them books is what keeps her happy. What with that big bear of a husband and her 3 kids. So if Scotsmen that don't look like no real men, women that don't look like grown-up women is what keeps her happy, then go for it, says I. And those ain't the only books she gets. Sometimes she gets a western, all hats and horses on the cover, and once or twice she's even got picture books. Although she hasn't brought one home for a while, so I don't expect it went over real well with her kids or her Mike. But this time we were chatting and the sun was shining for spring, and she's all happy to get to Ben's Cross and the bookmobile's waiting for her. I mean, not just for her. There's 3 or 4 other people come every month. Some even bring their kids, but still she gets desperate worried when she gets down to the cross and the bookmobile ain't there yet. Ben's Cross ain't a town, it's just crossroads. One of them's even paved. And it's called that because Ben Chambers, who was old when I was young, he set up a little grocery store there and now his grandsons run it. The bookmobile parks in the dirt patch outside Ben's, out of the way of the one gas pump. And Maeve runs on in like she's a little girl again. I just take care of some business in Ben's and go back out to my truck to eat an apple and wait. Maeve's usually in there 15 or 20 minutes, which isn't enough time for a good nap, but I can just sit with my thoughts. If I were my own best company, I wouldn't have lived alone for the last 40 years. So this time, when Maeve steps off the bookmobile, she's not as bouncy as she usually is. I don't mean something's wrong, but it's not as right as usual. She gets in, and I start back up the mountain, listening to my transmission complain. Maeve just looks at her books like she's puzzled or something. "Everything okay in the bookmobile?" I say. She says, "Yeah, they didn't have any more Louis Lamer books this time, so I got some other stuff." And it was a different lady this time. She said the normal lady's been sick a couple weeks. The normal one knows what I like, but this lady... Maeve holds up a book. I know the road well enough to look over at it while I'm driving First thing I see is it's a hardcover, not like the paperback she always gets. And it's about half again as big as the paperbacks. The cover ain't got no art. It's dark green fabric and the corners are banged up like it's been around a while. I said, she wouldn't let you get what you like? Oh no, I got some of those too, she said, and she holds up the normal things she reads, all shirtless men and shameless women. But she said, when I said there weren't no more Louis Lamer books, she said I ought to try out something different, so as I don't run out of the stuff I already know I like. I guess that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I nodded and said, if you don't like a bookmobile book, it don't cost you nothing to stop reading it. She says, exactly. The lady says that reading puts new stuff in your head. I never thought of it that way, but sounds true enough, right? I mean, unless I read about it, I ain't never gonna see stuff like this on the mountain. She holds up her paperbacks. I say, did I ever tell you I saw old Cal Coogans without a shirt just like that? Oh, hush it, Joe, she laughs. You're gonna make me throw up all over your windshield. I didn't see Maeve for a couple of weeks, but that ain't unusual. We're pretty close neighbors, about 3/4 of a mile, but I don't have much call to go that direction on our road. And if Maeve has call to come mine, she sure don't need to stop and say hi every time she goes by. But anyways, it's a couple weeks later in the evening after I've stopped work, and I'm out by the pump filling up a bucket to take in for the wash, and Maeve's middle child comes up. I cannot remember whether his name is Jerry or Jamie, I never have, but I know who he is anyway. He says, Mr. McDonnell, can you come up to my house and see my mom? I think she's sick. I say, where's your papa at? He says, he's still working at the fields across the valley and he don't get back till late, but Mama, she's acting like she's off or something. And I thought at first Jerry or Jamie was out of breath and trembly from running my place, but now I can tell he's a little bit scared. This is his mother after all. I say, is the other kids with her? And he says, yes sir, Rebecca sent me down to fetch you while she watches Mama. So I set aside the bucket and say, go ahead and get in my truck, we'll take the easy way up. So off we go in my truck, and it's getting pretty dark by the time I get to their house. Parts of their house is old, and parts isn't so much. It used to be a one-roomer long before they got it, and it's just been added to, lean-to on top of lean-to. I go in with him, and there's Rebecca standing by the door, all coltish and almost as tall as me, but no flesh on her yet. And the baby girl's kind of standing behind her skirts, and Rebecca says, thanks for coming, Mr. McDonnell, and sorry for the trouble. I say, where's your mama? Because I figure she'll be lying down sick somewheres, but as soon as I say it, I see Maeve coming out of the kitchen, just walking slow, but not hurt or nothing, just humming to herself. I'm confused. And I just look at her because she don't look sick at first glance, and I figure I'll ask her what's going on. She doesn't even see me. She acts like just wanders around the house humming like some weird bird-like tune. I say, Maeve, everything okay? And she still doesn't say anything, just goes right on by like she's wandering through a stranger's house. I look at the kids, and Rebecca's trying to act brave, but it ain't working. I say, she been like this long? And Rebecca nods and says, she was making supper, and then she dropped the knife and just started roaming like that. I say, she answered you when you talked to her? And she and the boy just look at each other, and she says, no, and he says, it's not like words. I ask them what they mean, but they just shrug like they don't know any other way to say it. So I follow Maeve, where she walks into her bedroom. I walk all slow and gentle so as not to startle her, just like they say you shouldn't startle someone who's sleepwalking. And I say, Maeve, it's Joe. Wanna tell me what's going on? Still, she don't answer, just hums that bird song, all highs and lows and no real tune. So I say louder, Maeve, and I put a hand on her shoulder. She turns around then and looks at me, and her eyes are like they're not hers. And she says something, but it don't sound like any kind of English. It don't sound like any kind of speaking. It just sounds like they're coming from somewhere deep inside her. Then she tries to walk past me, and I say, stop it, Maeve, you're scaring the kids. And I hold her back with my hand on her shoulder. And suddenly she bares her teeth at me, and her eyes look like cat's eyes. And then she slumps to the ground. And I'm too old and slow to catch her, so her chest and head bounce off the wood floor, but she's like she's out. So I tell the kids to come help me, and together we lift her onto her bed, while the youngest just stands in the corner and sniffles. And I'm starting to worry that something's gone wrong with her, like a heart attack or a stroke. I hear they can even hit younger folks. But then she shakes her head slow and blinks and says, "Joe, what are you doing here? Why does my head hurt?" Well, the two older kids start crying. So I push them away to where the younger one is standing while I tell her what happened. And she's puzzled, because she says she didn't feel sick today at all, not even a headache. But she seems fine now, except for a bruise on the forehead, so she gets off the bed and says, "Kids, we better get her in on dinner. Joe, won't you stay and eat?" I figure I might as well, just to make sure everything's okay, so I stand out of the way while the kids help her get everything together and the table set. Right on the corner of the table is that book from the bookmobile, the hardcover. She's using her bookmobile card for a bookmark, so I can see she's into it some. I say, "So is this book any good after all?" And she laughs from the kitchen and says, "It's sure different, but it's a good different. And the lady was right, it sure does put stuff in my head." I say, "What kind of stuff?" And she laughs again and says, "You want to know what's in a book, Joe? The best way is to read it. I can loan it to you when I'm done." But I say, "I ain't read a book probably 10 years, don't want to start now." I eat with them all, watch the kids laugh and tease and forget what brought me there. Even Maeve acts like she's forgot, but I don't forget. And though I laugh with them all and eat hearty, I watch. When I leave, it's full dark and Mike isn't back yet, but probably will be soon. Maeve's got a plate waiting in the oven to stay warm, and I wave goodbye and go out to my truck. It can't be 3 days later that someone wakes me up pounding on my door. I don't wake up easy, but whoever's pounding ain't going away. So I yell something, pull on my trousers, and I don't grab my rifle, but I make sure I know where it is. Mike's standing there, chafed at how long it took me to open up. I say, "Ain't you usually gone working by this time?" And he says, "Gotta talk to you, Joe. It's about Maeve." So I invite him in. I ain't got coffee or anything ready, of course, and I ain't rushing my business in my morning just because I got a visitor. Mike and me, we don't get along too well. Never been an open quarrel or anything like that, but he's a big, stern bear of a man, hair all over his body and a beard that starts near to his eyebrows, and he's got a sense of humor like a brown bear somebody woke up too early in the spring. I never seen why he went after Maeve, and I've never seen why she said yes to him. Like I said, she's near enough to a daughter to me, so even after all these years, I keep watching him to make sure he's keeping her happy. Like I said, I got no coffee or anything to offer him, so I kick out a chair and sit down on my own. "Go ahead, I'm listening," I say. He says, "You were up to my place this week?" I said, "One of your kids came and got me because Maeve seemed sick, but she got better after I got there." He said, "Sick how?" And I say he's not suspicious or angry, he's worried. So I tell him how Maeve was when I got there and what happened. He grunts and says, "Kids didn't tell me any of that, nor Maeve neither." "What's the matter now?" I say. "Is she wandering around again?" "Yeah, but not quite," he says. "I woke up in the night because I heard something outside and she wasn't in bed. I looked out the window and there she is out back by the shed, lying in the grass and hollering." I go out to ask her what the holy hell she's doing, but it's like she didn't recognize me. She just grabbed at her hair and shouted things, nonsense things. "Like bird call?" I say. He just looks at me strange and says, "Hell no, she's talking about fog and stars and what all I don't know about books and old men and fish, and you should have heard her. It was like she was trying to say stuff she didn't know how to say. She said she's trying to talk it out of her head." When he says that, it gets me to remembering something, so I say, "Did she have a green book?" Mike looks at me even stranger and says, "Damn right she did, on the grass with her, and she was rolling back and forth across it. When she finally stopped, she up and passed out, and I picked her up and carried her in. I went back out and got the book." "You know what it is?" Well, I know Mike can't read more than his own name. I say, "Just something she got from the bookmobile, I guess. She's at home right now?" He nods and says, "She was sleeping when I left. I sent Jamie to watching her close and not let her out of the house." I said, "I don't have a lot to do today, at least nothing I can't put off. You want me to take her down mountain to a doctor?" Mike says, "I'd really appreciate that, Joe. I'm behind on my fields as it is, and I can't spare the day." I say, "Let me get some breakfast, and then I'll come up your way and get her. Tell the kids I shouldn't be long." He got up and shook my hand and went out and turned his truck around to go back up to his place. I dunked my head in a bucket and put on some clothes, made made coffee and got some breakfast, got all the way outside before I remembered that my truck couldn't go anywhere, at least not right away. I'd had the radiator out working on it last night until I lost the daylight and had to leave it torn out. So I got back in there and wrestled with it and cursed and got it back in the truck just before noon. Maybe no better than it was before I got it out, but at least no worse. And I finally drove up to their house. When I got there, all 3 kids were sitting outside the front door and they looked scared to death. As soon as I got out of the truck, I heard things from inside, thumping and stuff breaking and caterwauling that I couldn't make out. I said, what happened? How long she been like this? And Rebecca said, right after breakfast, we were cleaning up and she was washing a knife and cut her finger, and all of a sudden she just stuck the knife right through her hand. I tried to get the knife away from her, and Jamie said, I helped. And Rebecca said, and then she started screaming, I want it out, I want it out, and starts breaking stuff. The baby was crying, her nose running down off her chin, and Maeve inside sounded hoarse, like she'd been yelling for hours. I got up close to the door. Maeve, I said, this is Joe, what's the matter? And something hit on the other side of the door like she'd thrown something, and she said, I want it out, I want all of them out. I said, all the children are out, Maeve, what do you want out? And she said, there's things in my head and I want them out. That book put things in my head, how do I get them out? I say, what things? But she just screams for an answer, and it sounds like she's kicking and punching a wall. All I know is she's gonna hurt herself bad no matter what's wrong with her head. And I say, Maeve, cut it out, you're scaring your children, let me help you. I start to tell her that I'll take her down mountain to the doctor, but there's a crash from inside, and I know she can't hear me. I tell the kids to go get in my truck far from the door, and I take a breath, and then I open the front door and rush in, but it's quiet. And I think, that crash was the last thing I heard, like a window. And there's the window in the kitchen busted out, and blood on the glass had left because she climbed through. I get to the window, and I can see her run into the tool shed out back. I'm not spry enough to follow her through the window, so I go back out through the front and around the house and to the tool shed. The door on the tool shed is something Mike scrounged from an old house before it fell down, and the way it swings, it's got a lock on the inside, and it's locked. I say, Maeve, open the door, ain't nothing that can help you in there. But I hear her crashing around with tools and whatnot, and then I hear her scream, and she keeps screaming, and there's something sounds wet, too. Well, the door may be solid, but it's an old tool shed, so I find a gray board coming loose on the front beside the door, and I start pulling, and slowly the old nail comes out of the old wood. The nail screeches like a cat, but even over that, I can hear her screaming without a stop. My old arms ain't used to this, but I keep pulling, and finally the board pulls all the way out so that I can reach in and grab the lock and finally get it open. I open the door and Maeve's not screaming anymore. She's got it back to me and she's shaking like nothing I ever saw before. And I say, Maeve, what you doing, Maeve? And she says, what you said, Joe? And turns around, she's smiling, there's a bow saw in her hand and the front part of her forehead's off. Clean sawed off, there's blood all down her face and I can see her brain where her head should be. And she says, you said cut it out, Joe, so I am. The new things in my head from the book, I don't want them there, so I'm cutting them all out. All out, Joe, I'm cutting them all out.